This episode of Misery Hunters is brought to you by Paisley Craft Beer Co., Paisley's #1 and only craft beer venue. You can sit in and take away, and we've also just introduced a local delivery service. So if you live in the Renfrewshire area and are looking for craft beer, we can deliver the same day if you order before 1 o'clock. Next day delivery is well for any time after that. Minimum order is £20. Any orders over 60, you get free delivery. So what are you waiting for? Go to paisleycraftbeer.com. That's paisleycraftbeer.com. Hello, you miserable bastards, and welcome to the Misery Hunters podcast. My name is Jamie Coburn, and joining me is Mark Jordan.
Hello.
And it's a return from one of our OGs, but which one is it? It's Craig Devine.
Collectively, everyone just went, ah.
Everyone went, oh, thank God it's not Ross. I know everybody loves Ross.
Best of luck to Ross and Sam on their VAR training. They're going to be running the control unit. So,
I mean, we can talk about VAR right now if you want, or do you want to talk about the Rangers game?
I don't want to talk about either of them.
I'm sure we can talk about both, but first of all, we'll talk about the Rangers game. I mean, it was always going to be a tough one. You did say, Mark, that Kamar Roof was going to score a few. He did.
Yep.
You even got praise from a fantasy football fan.
I was going to come on here and ask who it was that said that.
It was Mark.
I couldn't remember if it was you, Jamie, or if it was Mark, but fuck you.
Just assume if it's, blown back in our faces, that was probably me that said it. I think that's a fairly safe bet. Mm-hmm. I think I'd predicted a Kenny Miller-esque 5-goal haul. And when the third went in, I was 99% sure that 5 goals were coming. There was no doubt in my mind whatsoever. But, we managed to only let them score one in the second half, so that was good. It's a victory. We can take confidence from that and, prepare for next week.
We only lost the second half 2-0.
Only lost the first half 2-0.
I mean, if you played Rangers twice and you only lose 2-0 in both of them, they're not the worst results, so you've got to take positives.
It's good. I do have a tendency sometimes, if we're bad, to drift out of games a wee bit towards the end.
Oh, yeah.
But I have never in a catalogue of terrible home games that I've seen, terrible away games that I've seen, I have never checked out of watching us to the same extent as I did in that second half. I didn't see Joe Aribo's goal. I didn't just say that on Twitter for the likes, for the clout. I literally missed Joe Aribo's score because I was playing Wordle. I didn't see the goal go in, and I had to ask the person I was sitting with if it was a good goal or not, because I just looked up and he was standing.
Was it a good goal?
Yards out.
I made a promise to myself. I said, if they score a fourth goal, I'm leaving. And then right before it went in, I thought, fuck, I just score so I can go home. This is terrible.
And so it's your fault they scored the fourth? Aribo heard you say just score and he went, fuck it, okay. See you later, Craig.
It's Dean Linus's fault.
Jesus. Well, hopefully that's the last we'll see of him. Unless Anik does something mental against Hibs. And, you'll never rule that out. Was it a good goal, Mark? Did they tell you it was a good goal?
Yeah, I watched the highlights earlier on.
I watched the highlights as well, but I checked
I did say it was a good down.
I said, if this scored a fourth, I'm turning this off, and I did.
I think Aribo's goal was real progress for us, because for the first 2 goals, we gave Kamar Roof 5 yards of space inside the 6-yard box. And for Aribo's goal, we gave him that space just outside the box. So if we keep going as we're going, eventually by the end of the season, we might get to a point where we're only giving people space in their own half. But that might be asking a bit much. Those first 2 goals, I will never get too upset about taking, a kind of minor pasting off either half of the Old Firm. It is what it is. You don't want it to happen, but if you're going to get pasted off someone, it's probably going to be one of them. It's fine. 4-0 in the scheme of things. As an actual result, it's not good. I don't accept it, but it's not the end of the world. But what I can't abide are those first two goals, just so unbelievably poor.
Mm-hmm.
You've got one real job playing against Rangers. Everyone will accept the fact that we don't score. Everyone will accept the fact that we've got 20% of the ball. Everyone will accept the fact that Joe Aribo can shape one into the top bin from 25 yards every now and then, and you can't really do much to stop it other than tackle him or mark him. But you can't let the one centre forward on the pitch stand in literal yards of space on the edge of the 6-yard box and land crosses on his forehead. It's just not acceptable. I don't know how we got into a position once and let that happen. I'm even more perplexed as to how we let it happen twice.
First minute.
Yeah,
if there's going to be a time that you let in, or give away two cheap goals such as that, you don't want it to be in the first minute of the first half and in the last minute of the first half. It's just two awful times to give away a goal. I think for the first one, half of the team were just sleeping. Is it Jones that gets caught out down the left-hand side?
And I can't even remember the defence.
They want to track back.
Who made the defensive error? I'm sure someone was supposed to follow the man and didn't. And didn't shout out that he was still free for someone else or something that I can't remember. I think it was Shaughnessy that told Dunn to go to him, and then Dunn continued running with his man or something that I can't remember.
The first one's the one where the cross comes across from the right, and then it misses everyone, but hits, I think, maybe Kent at the back, and Kent just lifts it back over onto Roof's head. I think that's the first one. And Fraser is playing piggy in the middle. He's under the first cross and nowhere near it, and then runs off of his man to try and close the second cross down with ever getting anywhere near it. And it's just lobed over him, and Shaughnessy's nowhere. That's a couple of poor games in a row for Shaughnessy, to be honest.
And that's coming from the number one Shaughnessy podcast.
Yeah, it pains me to say it. The second one's pretty similar. Marcus Fraser marking his own farts, just doing the square root of nothing on his own in the box, just letting centre forwards that have played, good teams in England and the top flight in Belgium and scored from their own half in the Europa League, just saying why not have a wee free header from 6 yards out, because why not? Fraser's regression is kind of startling, to be honest. And I think there's some truth to he somehow ended up in a position where he was a right back and now he's not a right back, and at one time he was a centre half and now he's not a centre half. And I think to get the best out of Fraser, you probably do need to play back three with him on the right and kind of let him do his thing. But we weren't playing well in that system, and he wasn't doing too well. I don't think it rewrites history. I think for the majority of his time with us, he's been a real standout. I've had him near enough player of the year for us a couple of times. It doesn't change that, but it doesn't look like that player just now at all. And he's not been asked to do a job that's, markedly different to that. We're playing a back four against a really attacking Rangers team where your back four are an actual back four. It's not, we need Marcus Fraser to cover 90 yards of turf. He's essentially a kind of wide centre half in that back four and just there to try and stop stuff coming into the box. And if he's in the box, to mark players, and he did neither all day.
We should maybe, let's try not be completely negative, which is hard to say, but two standout performances from that match. I mean, Connor Ronan had a good game. Like, we're going to miss him big time next season if we don't replace him. Or hopefully Wolves will agree to loan us maybe again, but I think they've got plans on either selling him or maybe a loan deal to someone a bit higher up in the English football. But I thought Alex Grieve again was excellent when he came on. Like,
yeah, he was a real handful.
It's the only time we really challenged the Rangers' goal was when he came on. Like, I genuinely think he has to start against Hibs.
I didn't actually see Greaves' attempt towards the end of the game, so obviously I got up and left as soon as the fourth goal hit the back of the net. But for what I heard, it was pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a good save from McGregor. Kind of lashed from wide left, maybe just outside the box. I think off the top of my head. I think that's it. You do need to balance it against the fact I think Rangers had chucked it at that point. You know, they had quarterfinals and semi-finals and league games and all the rest of it to think about, and I think their foot was off the gas a bit by that point. But even then, it still takes someone to come on into a team of guys on our side who didn't look that up for it either, and try and drive them on a bit. And I think I mentioned it last week. I'd watched a fair amount of the first half of New Zealand's game that was shown live, their kind of last group game where they got to their playoff. I can't remember who they were playing against now, some kind of small island nation that I can't remember off the top of my head. But the Grieve started as a kind of wide forward, and almost everything good that happened for New Zealand, winning free kicks to get them in for Chris Wood, and for others pressing defenders who weren't particularly good on the ball. All of that was Grieve. He was absolutely relentless. He covered every blade of grass. He got battered and then got back up again and did it again the next time, and just looks like a guy playing park football who absolutely loves it. And to be honest, just now, where you could probably question some of our commitment, you could certainly question some of our composure. I think you're right, Jamie. I think getting him in, who's at the very least going to throw himself into stuff and chase things right down and just make things out of nothing, I would be playing him 100%.
It reminds me a lot like Christian Dennis is, but Christian Dennis doesn't have the legs to do it for as long as Alex Grieve, and we've got Alex Grieve at this moment where he is trying to prove himself that he can make the jump to professional football, that he can be an international striker. So he's going to be powering through everything, like throwing himself at everything, winning challenges, getting kicked, getting everything, taking shots. We may as well use that while he's still doing it. Otherwise, you know, we don't use him. He gets frustrated, asks for a move elsewhere, and then they get the best out of him.
Yeah, I think
I'd go a step further. I'd potentially look at giving him a longer term deal now before it becomes too late and he does kick on after a full pre-season. I think Goodwin, when he was just before he left, you know, that kind of interview he gave like 5 days before he left, where he promised he was going to see it out. I think he did mention that they were looking to tie Grieve down to a longer term deal, unless I just totally made that up.
They definitely said that there was that he came in and he was quite raw, and but they were really blown away with how much better they were than they thought he was going to be.
I think he's took a lot of people by surprise.
And they said that there was already talks about a new contract, and I'm hoping Robinson continues that, and the new CEO as well. Which I think we can talk. Should we talk about the new CEO? Should we talk about the top six? Not the top six, the bottom six. The post-split fixtures. We're up against managerless Hibernian first. And will they have a new manager bounce or sacked manager bounce?
I did think that was interesting, the Kyle Gunn stat that had been dragged up about the last... This will be the third time in a row that Hibs have sacked their manager and then shown up in Paisley for the next game. Sure, so I think David Gray's previous game as manager was against us in Paisley, and Eddie May. Yeah. And Eddie May before, when I guess when Lennon or when Heckenbottom get binned, maybe. Is it when Heckenbottom get binned?
I think so, yeah.
It's hard to know what to expect out of a Hibs team. I don't know if it would have been better or worse to have Maloney in the dugout. I think they're, I think they're. You can draw some parallels to how we've been recently and to how they've been, but that's a manager who had an extra couple of months, a full transfer window, and also I think people were saying it was at 3 wins in 19, but 2 of those wins were against, or 4 wins, but 2 of those 3 of the wins were Cove Rangers, Arbroath, and 10-man Motherwell.
And then Motherwell, yeah.
With 10 men. You're talking about 1 win in 16 games.
His major downfall with that is the fact is they didn't replace Martin Boyle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went back and watched the highlights for the last time they were in Paisley when David Gray was in charge, and that was one that we escaped by a point from. I think it was Shaughnessy 87th minute or something, kind of stole us a point back. But I know what you mean. I don't really know what to expect on Saturday, because obviously there was that game in Paisley, and then we went through to Edinburgh and beat Hibs. They should have really won that game if it wasn't for Jack Anick pulling out about 95 saves.
Yeah.
So I've not really got any idea what type of team to expect. And to be perfectly honest, I wouldn't be against another 1-1 draw.
No, you definitely take a point there when you look at it. I reckon I'm going to put it out there, and you can soundbite it, whatever. Out the last 5 games, we're going to take 9 points.
Ambitious.
That's bold.
I think
That's ambitious.
we're going to beat Hibs. We're going to beat St Johnstone,
Big talk.
which I know, especially in Perth, where we fucking hate playing. But I reckon we'll beat them there as well, and then we'll beat Dundee. We'll probably lose or draw against Livingston. The Aberdeen one, who knows? But I reckon out the next 5 games we'll get 9 points. We'll be safe.
I think for me it's just potentially match whatever St Johnstone do at the weekend, and then I think it maybe all comes down to the game against St Johnstone. I think that's the following week, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Is Dundee the midweeker?
Is it? I think Dundee's the 7th, because I think I missed that game.
Dundee's the 7th, Livingston on the 11th, and then Aberdeen on the 15th.
Yeah, I honestly reckon if we match whatever St Johnstone do at the weekend, and then if we take anything against them, then we're absolutely fine. I wouldn't quite say I'm looking over my shoulder too worried about it, but I think if we lose on Saturday and St Johnstone win, the heads will start to go a wee bit.
I'd fully expect our approach to the next 5 games to be
Shit fest.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to. I don't think Robinson will be under any illusions that he's relying on goodwill a little bit, even at this kind of early stage, and I think he deserves it, and we're well documented. But a shit run like that, when we've got a tendency to get ahead of ourselves, you are relying on the board to stick by you like they said they would, in the face of not a majority of fans, but the majority of the volume coming out of our fans being particularly unhappy and kind of questioning things. So I don't think he's going to be under any illusions as to what the minimum expectation is out of these games, and I think he probably will be a bit more pragmatic than he has been.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we'll probably play a bit more defensively. You won't still relying on centre halves to pick up people in the 6-yard box and all the rest of it, but I would be surprised to see us go 4-3-3 for sure.
Yeah,
I think that's a bit expansive.
4-6-0.
I reckon we're going to see a return of the back 3, and I know everybody's going to lose their fucking shit when it happens, but I think we need to. Yeah, it doesn't produce the best of football, but we're going to have to. We've been leaking goals, and the defence looks completely unorganised. We're going to return to this position where we can probably get if we play the right players in the right position, we'll probably get the best of them for the last few games. And I generally don't. I don't know why I'm very optimistic, and I reckon I don't feel like we're facing relegation or the playoff spot. I don't think we're going to be close to that. I genuinely think we'll beat Hibs. I don't like. I know the football under Maloney and whatever's been said. I don't think the issues were fully on him. I think Hibs have a few other issues that were just not resolved, and the biggest thing of that was Martin Boyle. And
you lose Boyle, Nisbet gets injured, and Deutsch has been off it, then you're relying a lot on a Norwegian teenager that I think they probably saw more. And it's not entirely dissimilar to us being left with grief at the turn of the year, and we were lucky that worked out the way it did. We weren't far at all from Goodwin but getting really found out in terms of squad levels before he left. I'm not going to call it luck. You can't rewrite history on it, but we weren't far away from being in a similar kind of situation at that point, and we are in a similar situation to Hibs now. I don't think we'll see, the way we've been lining up, where you've got Brophy or someone or Grieve in the middle with Henderson and Jones with license to play as a 3 and Ronan sitting behind him. I don't think we're going to see 4 players like that again in these kind of end the season games. I think we'd be more likely to maybe play Brophy and Grieve with maybe Ronan behind them, or maybe Brophy in front of, say, Ronan and Henderson or something similar, and then you really are just shit-festing at the back and giving Gogic and Power license to sit in front of a back four. I don't know if Tanser's going to be fit or if he's not, but you give your wing backs the chance to do a bit of running about and do the rest, and just take the rest of the weak points out where I think we've been getting picked apart. I mean, Richard Tate has been so obviously marked out by opposition in the last wee while. It probably tells you.
Rangers.
Yeah, it's I'm not saying they're similar players, but watching teams play against us just now, it's almost like going back to the Waters season where you just knew every game. That's what teams were shaping up to do. They were bullying us down one side and getting easy crosses in, and it feels a bit like that just now, and it's a shame because Tate's a player that I've really liked for the majority of his time with us. It's not like I dislike him now at all, but he hasn't. I'm amazed that he got an extra year because he has the look just now of someone who's maybe coming to the end of their first team kind of use in the squad, and maybe taking a step back once we get some fresher legs in there.
Maybe that contract next year's for him to be our fitness coach.
I'd take it. I'd absolutely take it. Maybe he's a new sports scientist.
No.
I think we'd kind of covered this in one of the group chat discussions, is that I don't think anyone would particularly be against Tate just being around for a while as a squad player, but yeah, I'd agree. I think his days as a first team starter are coming to an end over this next 5 games.
He's great cover. He's a dependable right and left back and a wide centre half. You can throw him in at centre half proper if you need to. He's played in holding midfield, which wasn't a successful experiment, but he's capable of filling in. You need more players like that who can fill gaps, but I don't think he should be our first choice right or left back.
I think for me, he's maybe an option to chuck on when there's some tired legs for the last 20 minutes, just because his fitness levels, fair enough, he's lost a step, but he's still a really, really fit guy, or to maybe fill in if there's an injury. But other than that, if we're still lining up with him in the starting 11 next season, something's gone terribly wrong, I think.
It's Flynn's role this season, isn't it? He's there, he's capable, you can trust him, he's never going to phone it in, but if he's starting, it's because there's an issue with the kind of strength of the squad.
We'll talk about another positive thing coming out of the club in recent times, and that's the youth team, the Ralston Academy. Quite a few good stories coming out of it, and we also can have a look at other players that are out on loan, like Kieran Offord still scoring for fun. I mean, I know is it the Lowland League? Is that what it is? Lowland League? Northern League?
I think so.
I think it's the Lowland League, yeah. I know what you mean, because seeing the highlights for their game at the weekend with the second goal that he scored, for the keeper came out and just tried to boot him, and then couldn't even be arsed running back to try and chase back. But
how different is the Lowland League to the New Zealand League?
Very true, very true. How many? I've lost count of how many he's scored. I think he must be on about 13 or 14 by now. I was trying to find the stats for that league at the weekend, and they're just impossible to find.
It was 9 and 12 last. I knew a definite number, and he certainly scored, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 since then. So I think you're probably right. Probably somewhere like 13, 14. I think his interview was so refreshing, so positive to hear. To be honest, this is something the club could maybe have been doing a bit more of, and I don't think it's a coincidence that they've been taking a bit of a battering about Robinson and all the rest of it, and they've kind of retreated and started to put a bit more of a spotlight on some of the good stuff that will get folk back on side again. I think it probably is a little bit cynical, but that's not to say it's not correct and not the right way to do it, and we should have been doing this, and we should have been shouting about this all season.
Years.
Offord's on a development loan. He trains with us full time, and goes out and plays with them part time, and nothing is going to get fans back on board. I'm a fairly easy mark for this, than having someone like that who's been touted already, who's got a bit of international recognition, who we've convinced to sign a long-term contract. You would assume on the basis of getting some first-team exposure. And he's up there front and centre, confident, saying, I don't think I've made it because I've got this contract and because people are talking about me. I realise that the guys that I'm training with now are ahead of me. And that in order for me to get ahead of them, I have to work harder than them. So when they're training, I'm training longer. When they're taking days off, I'm in and I'm working. Like, that's such a refreshing attitude to hear. Yeah. We've had plenty of players come through who have been talented all the way through and then haven't really pushed on and have kind of gone the other way. I think to have someone come through who's got the talent and has already been talked about and has been held up to that level, and then to actually hear him say, you know, I've not achieved anything yet. I'm here to push on and to get into the first team, and to see a manager that's listening to that and to see footage. And also, it's not just the main guy that everyone's talking about. You've got, is it Fraser Taylor, Daniel Taylor?
Fraser Taylor.
Daniel McDonald. You had the three guys on the bench for the Rangers game. Gallagher's the only one whose name I can remember off the top of my head. But again, from talking to people, all of them rated. They weren't, you know, you can maybe call them place fillers because we had gaps on the bench, but none of them were just there because they were available. The boys that made it onto the bench, from what I've been told by a few people, by folk that have watched games, by folk that have, parents and whatever else. These guys are all very capable. They're all expected to have the ability, if they've got the drive, to push on and to start giving the manager decisions to make. And that's such a positive. So, having moaned for the last half hour, I think there's a real value in accepting and recognising that there are positives that we should hopefully be seeing sooner rather than later. I don't think we're going to have a squad full of 16, 17-year-olds next year. I think we're going to do a lot of recruitment in the summer, but it's good to know that there's people that are knocking the door now and pushing for that, and who, by all appearances, deserve the opportunity. And I hope that's the case. Lewis Jameson as well.
Yeah.
Scored again for Clyde at the weekend. It's not easier to score goals in League One. It's not easier to put the ball away. That's
Griffiths. Apparently the most natural goal scorer we've ever seen in Scotland.
Would have been the difference between us getting European football or not, if you would believe certain accounts. Who, not that I'm going to generalise, but would also be the same kind of people who would want Robinson sacked after 7 games. Not that I'm tarring everyone with the same brush, but I see your account.
Just back on Offord for a second. I think there's maybe, like, even in Jameson's case as well, I suppose, but there's maybe an additional bit of excitement about that type of player because it's the first goal scorer, or like forward type player that we've produced in a while that's actually looking like they're going to come through and make an impact, because it's been, I can't remember the last time a forward player came through the academy and done anything.
Stephen McGarry, that's the only one I can think of.
Which is baffling, considering that was 20 plus years ago, and we've got such a vaunted academy with such a good reputation that we don't produce forwards.
And it's a kind of lean time to be coming through as well. So in all those other times where we've maybe not had that person coming through, we would normally have a talismanic striker that you can rely on. Just now we've got Brophy, who I'm still convinced is of the ability that we need. But it's 8 goals across an entire season. Greaves good. I think Greaves deserves lots of chances and deserves all of our backing. But he's got a few goals. He's not. He's not undroppable. Main's unplayable. So you're coming in at a point where he's 18. He's absolutely smashing it at a lower level, but he's saying the right things. He's taking his chance in front of the first team squad. It would appear he's getting the interest in the backing of the manager, and he's coming into a squad next year where, unless we sign 2 top flight proven strikers, why not? Why isn't this 18-year-old guy who's obviously got an eye for goal and a real bit of composure about him and a real bit of talent, why is he not going to get first team games? I think it's the perfect time for someone like that to come through. He could have come through 5, 6, 7 years ago and he wasn't getting in front of Stevie Thompson and all the rest of it. That's not who we are anymore. There's a gap for someone like that now. So I think the timing might be perfect.
maybe even simplifying things a bit too much. He also doesn't potentially have to compete against a random journeyman striker from Europe just because of how difficult it's obviously going to be now to sign that type of player. So straight away there's another route into the first team for him.
Well, that's the thing. I think I can't remember who said it before that they were going to do it, whether this might have been Gus McPherson, it might have been probably actually Danny Lennon, where he said that utilising the youth, especially on the bench kind of thing, allows you to spend maybe a wee bit more money on the players on the park, because rather than having a budget for your first team and some backup players, like these youth players are always going to be at the club. Like they're there. Why not use them?
Yeah.
And that allows you
Sound
to
like a Gus thing to say.
I know. So but I can't think who said it. Maybe it must have been Danny Lennon. He's all about the youth on his island.
And look at Robinson at Motherwell as well. Like the players that they were capable of bringing in and giving a chance to, because you had Cadden and Campbell and Turnbull and Scott and Hasty and all these guys. You know, if you've got 6, 7, 8 young players in your squad who not only are good enough to provide a wee bit of competition beyond the bench, but you know that if they come in, they can make a real difference as well. You can go out and spend 2 strikers worth of money on Lewis Moult or you know, whoever it was out wing, Jermaine Hilton or Marvin Johnson, maybe, like whoever these guys are. It frees you up totally, and I don't think it's a coincidence at all that they're making a bit more of a song and dance about the academy just now, and that Robinson's happy to get on camera talking about it and to actually commit to things and then give himself a standard to be held up against. I think that's a bit of a divergence from maybe how it was under Goodwin.
And I also don't think it's a coincidence that, you know, us as a podcast has always kind of mentioned the youth team, especially you, Mark, you've been right behind it as well, and how maybe Jim Goodwin doesn't do as much as he says he would and all that, especially surrounding like certain youth players. That this past 2 weeks, the academy Twitter started following us on. So I'm just saying,
good bunch of guys.
I don't think
great bunch of lads.
I don't think the Goodwin thing's entirely a secret, that he kind of at times was guilty of paying a bit of lip service. I know people will point to Dylan Reid getting a shot in the first team a few times and examples like that, but I think by and large it speaks volumes when you had so many gaps on the bench week in, week out, where it could have been filled with youth players. I know we've kind of already covered that point a few times, but it seems as if there's been a real kind of momentum shift the past few weeks. I think it's probably one of the only positive things of the initial few weeks of Robinson's time at the club. But
I mean, if you're Kieran Offord and Lewis Jameson and you're getting punted out on loan and you're sitting watching, I think someone's already mentioned this fact that Lee Erwin is sitting on the bench, you must be sitting, what the fuck? I need to move to kind of like, if I can't get ahead of him on the bench, what am I going to do?
If Erwin can't get on, with striker,
Erwin couldn't even get on the park in his own position. Was it McGrath that came on instead of him?
Gogic, come on.
Gogic, sorry, I'm thinking
famous centre forward Alex Gogic. Come on. And that's exactly it. I think you can talk about giving Reid his chances, and 5 minutes against Rangers when we're getting beat 3-0 or whatever it was, and a couple of starts when players were injured, but then nowhere at other times when the squad was weak, and then punted out on loan so that he's then unavailable for us for the rest of the season. And within a month of that, you've got a couple of red cards, a couple of injuries, and we're scrambling to get a reasonable team out, a reasonable midfield out. There's guys that are putting in consistently poor performances, and they're just there to keep playing because there's no depth.
Bombed the youth out the squad.
Yeah, and you've not. I'm not saying Dylan Reid's the answer. He's an unproven footballer. He didn't play week in, week out at Queen's Park. There's if he was the best midfielder in the country, you've got to assume he'd probably have started a few more games at Queen's Park. But I think his development and his kind of proper place, based on the squad we had this year, was absolutely as maybe the fourth choice centre mid in our squad, and actually getting some minutes instead of what we have seen at times when we've been playing 3 centre mids, and we've had to compromise massively to fill those slots. I think it's criminal, to be honest. I think the Offord thing as well, you can say he's unproven. He looked good against Celtic when he did get his goal, Goodwin had obviously told Erwin he wouldn't play for us again. Tried to get rid of Main, by all accounts. Did get rid of Dennis and Erwin. Signed a guy who was playing non-league football in New Zealand. And, like, highlights were getting mentioned on Bebo or something. And he's then your third choice striker.
Mm-hmm.
Having barely seen him ever play, and you've got a guy who's in the Scotland under-17 squad and who's come on and played well against Celtic, and you're saying, right, well, away down to the east of Scotland, Lowland League, brought to you by Greg's, and see what you can do for a few months, and then we'll maybe talk in the summer, if you're still here.
I have to say, I never
Just
thought I'd come onto this podcast tonight and hear Bebo getting a mention.
Never forget.
Well, love for love, and we'll move over on to what we were saying. Kind of links up. We were talking about where Stephen Robinson had his team set up at Motherwell with the youth kind of integrating really well with the more experienced, skillful players. Maybe we are trying to copy that Motherwell model. We've got a new chief exec. Is Keith Lasley? What's your thoughts on that?
All in favour.
It's one that was all in favour, yeah. One that seems to be quite unanimously well received, which is pretty strange for a group such as St Mirren fans.
It's unusual, isn't it?
Well, the thing is, I say unanimously well received. I've stopped reading the forums, so
yeah, I think you're still getting the folks saying, that he doesn't have any experience in this kind of job. We should be bringing in someone who's got director level experience. And it's like, right, well, it's the same as tearing apart Robinson without actually kind of talking about in context what you're looking for here.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want Lasley to come in, if you don't think that's good enough, sorry, Craig. If you don't think that's good enough and you want someone who's got real chief exec experience to come in, who are you actually talking about? Are we going to go and take a chief exec or a chief operating officer from another club in the top flight? No, that's not what we're doing. It's not what we're set up to do. Is there someone at a part-time team you think could make the step up? I would say probably not, or they would already begin talking about for the step up.
Yeah, if they'd been taken from that, they would have moaned why we went so low. It's the same argument when you try to replace a striker. Why are we not out there signing 20-goal plus strikers?
Yeah.
Because they cost a fortune. We can't afford that. You've got to find a gem and hope that the right formation, the right coach, the right training clicks and they start scoring goals.
Yeah.
I'll play
all these
slight
guys,
slight devil's advocate is that I do think initially, before you start looking into it too much, there's maybe some validity to the argument of, well, where's the experience? I'm not saying I entirely disagree with that, even though I'm happy with the appointment. But I think if you were to point the finger across any kind of figure in a position, higher up or in the background of a club in the top flight in Scotland, it would have probably landed on Keith Lasley anyway. And I think you're very right in what you're saying is that who would have been the other standout candidate? I think this is a guy that's obviously worked at Maxwell. This is a guy that's worked, under someone who is regarded as a very, very good CEO in Alan Burrows. He's going to have learned a whole lot from his time there. He's worked under what is a really good model at Motherwell, a club that many teams in top flight aspire to kind of match that model. So yeah, maybe initially it's valid, especially when you look at the criticism that Tony Fitzpatrick got that he wasn't qualified for the role either. But I think the two people are totally night and day apart in terms of who you're talking about here, and I think there's going to be a noticeable difference over the coming months now that we've got Lasley in charge.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I mention Maxwell is that he was playing part-time at Thistle and they were letting him do accounts while he was doing his further education. And then once he'd done that, he got a GM job, and then once the opportunity opened up, he was chief exec. And now, support or don't support what he's done at the SFA. He's now the chief executive of the SFA off the back of one job at Partick Thistle, off the back of doing a bit of admin while he was playing part-time. Like, that's how it works. If you don't want to give people these opportunities to step up and go based on, character references, the fact that he's doing this sports directorship course and all the rest of it, if you don't want to go off the back of that, then what you're really saying is we need to go outside of football to try and bring someone in. So the fact that someone's been the chief operating officer or chief exec at, a carpet company in the town or a marketing agency or something, are you saying is that really going to put you in a better position to take on this kind of job than Keith Lasley? I kind of think this is a job where, unless we're talking about an outstanding candidate, and I think if that was the case, we would know about it, you need to go within the game and you probably need to make a personality hire. You probably need to pick someone who, once you've spoken to them, fits the bill as to where you think you're going, and there's as many mitigating circumstances as possible. The fact he's worked for Dempster and Burrows, the fact that he's got, from by all accounts, outstanding references for what he was involved in at Motherwell across the kind of full picture of things, the fact he's going away to do this further learning, that he's been vocal about the fact he sees his future in that side of the game, high level management as opposed to necessarily team management. I don't see how it's a controversial appointment. I really don't. I can understand why you would have questions, and I think it's right that we do, but the mistake is to assume that you wouldn't have those questions about literally anyone that we'd hired. Yeah. I don't think there's a perfect candidate out there within our price range that you don't have to take that little bit of a risk on.
What I want
I think it's a sensible appointment.
Is his opinion on the stadium music?
He said he definitely wouldn't get Phil Clark back, so he's got my vote.
It's got my vote as well. That was a Sunderland reference, by the way, to Sunderland Till I Die, in case you're sitting there wondering what the hell I'm talking about.
No, I
something to get the guys going.
I finally just finished that. I know I'm about 5 years behind the rest of the world, but I finally just finished that season.
It's so good.
What a couple of absolute throbbers those guys were.
I know. And a quick mention that VAR will be in the league halfway through next season, funnily enough. What's your guys' opinions on it? See, I've been very quiet myself on it, just because I know it's going to cause so much drama. And that's what I'm for.
I think you've kind of touched on my first gripe with it, is that why are we deciding to bring it in halfway through a season?
Yeah. I think the thing for me is that it is not going to solve arguments. All it's going to do is switch the conversation from, I can't believe that referee in real time didn't give that decision, he must be a Rangers fan or a Celtic fan or a whatever, to how the hell's he watched that 12 times in slow motion and still given that wrong, he must be a Rangers fan or a Celtic fan.
It doesn't escape it.
Or whatever. It changes nothing. It's a slightly different conversation, but it solves none of the big problems with our game will be solved by this, and I think it takes a little bit of the remaining shine off of things where we are a wee bit different to down south. We're a bit less sanitised.
Yeah.
It takes a bit of the rougher edge off it, and I don't like it. I'm in favour of VAR, generally speaking. Champions League final and Premier League, and do you mean 1.8 billion getting pumped into a year? Of course you want decisions to be followed right down to the nth degree when the margins are what they are. Like, it's natural, it's fine. Not in Scotland. I don't know, it just takes a bit of the romance out of it.
You guarantee there's going to be a failure in the very first game that's used in. It's going to malfunction, or the TV screens will go off, or something mental.
Right, something really, really tin pot, but I don't even think, I think Mark's right, it doesn't get rid of the whole, it must be a Rangers/Celtic, delete as appropriate fan. When you see, I think it was Hartson in the papers the other day commenting on how they should bring up referees from England because they're going to be getting accused of bias. Like, you know, that kind of accusation is never going to go away regardless of VAR. But I think for me, one of the biggest things is that it's football. You don't have to get everything right. Like, by and large, unless you subscribe to conspiracy theories, most decisions that go against you in a season tend to even themselves out. I think it's a bit of a cliche, but I think that is genuinely the case most of the time. There's obviously exceptions.
Anyone that loses, to be honest.
I mean, have a look at our season. Like, was it last season where we had, like, I'd say, how many penalties did we have in total that season? Like, with Jimmy McGuire? 12
or 13.
How many of them were, like, proper penalties that you think were actually penalties. Like, I'd say less than half, because we were a bit shithousery back then, and I miss
Although
it.
remember when was it Mugabe tried to kill Lee Irwin? That was definitely a penalty.
Or was it Colin Quainer was nearly killed as well at one point?
Oh God, aye.
R.I.P.
I think also for me, it takes away. It seems to take away the joy of, I guess, celebrating a goal a wee bit. Like, not that I'm not a Liverpool or a Man City fan at all, but I remember watching the cup game between them a few weeks ago, and I think Man City scored to put 2-1 up. And the first thing the commentary said was, "Oh, Man City think they've taken the lead here," and they were obviously just waiting the extra 20-30 seconds for the goal to be confirmed. And I think that, for me, I think watching a team like St Mirren, where you're not affected by VAR up until now, fast forward a year, I think it's going to be really kind of different celebrating a goal, knowing in the back of your head someone's checking it to make sure it's all right.
Kind of feels like it will take away some of the quote unquote limbs thing, like where like when they go to like a limb shot after the goal's been announced, you've already kind of celebrated, and you're like, it's going to look bit like that.
Yeah, there is nothing worse. There's nothing worse than celebrating a goal wildly and then looking up and seeing the offside flags up, and you just go, fuck. But that's just going to be the permanent feeling now, isn't it?
Do you know the worst part about celebrating a goal that's offside is the guy who's always like a row in front of you that turns round and goes, "What?" No, like with his hands, like, it's like, right, mate, I've seen it now. I feel like an arsehole. You don't need to show me that you're more superior in watching the linesman than I am.
Yeah, we get it. You watch the linesman during the game.
Yeah,
well done. He's 13.
Yeah, but we'll move on from that, and we will be back after this.
Hi, I'm Eamon Brophy. You're listening to Misery Hunters podcast.
Thanks.
Cheers, Eamon.
And before we go to Mark, let's go to Billy.
Hello, this is Billy Mehmet, and this is the Billy Mehmet Hall of Fame. Let's do the dance.
Cheers, Billy. Highlight of my week here, isn't it? It really is. Not done much shouting about this week's Billy Mehmet Hall of Fame entrant, and that's because I picked it this afternoon before we recorded and threw the stuff together. But having had a couple of cult heroes and villains and panel choices and whatnot in recent weeks, I decided it was time to go back to the well of genuine all-time greats. And I think the second inductee so far who's also in the official club Hall of Fame, along with Sir Tony Fitzpatrick, of course, coming into the Billy Mehmet Hall of Fame this week is Israel Campbell Money, everyone's favourite goalkeeper. Born in deepest Ayrshire in Maybole in 1960. Before he was a Saint, he was a Polis, or on his way to being a Polis, but gave it up.
There's a link there with Polis and goalkeepers, is there not?
Keepers,
I'm thinking, because there's Derek Scrimger, I think Chris Smith.
Derek Scrimger probably thinks he's the best St Mirren keeper to then become a Polis. And he's been outdone, certainly by Money in some people's books, maybe by Chris Smith, but I couldn't possibly comment. But he jacked in the whole any illusions of a Polis career when Alex Ferguson came calling and brought him in to join his fledgling St Mirren side. And then Ferguson gets sacked within a month of him signing, and was replaced, I think, by Jim Clooney. Money made his debut almost straight away in a friendly against Southampton, up against Ted McDougall, Peter Osgood, some real kind of stars of that era of English football. I think it finished 1-1. He made a couple of decent saves, going by what I read earlier on. But for the first 6 years of his times with Saints, he was very much behind Billy Thompson in the rankings. Billy Thompson made more than 200 appearances over that time frame, but Money hung on, waited his time out. Thompson moved on to bigger, and inverted commas, better things at Dundee United, and sure, he was about when they were doing stuff in Europe and whatever else, but did he really win out when he was the Dundee United keeper in May 1987 and Campbell Money stuck it right up him for a glorious Scottish Cup final victory? He scored in the second round of the League Cup against Brecon in 1991 in a penalty shootout that we won and saw us through to the third round, and it obviously gave him a bit of confidence because in December 1992 he scored twice in penalties actually during games against Cowdenbeath and Clydebank. That gives him a record of 2 goals in 391 appearances, which is a comparable ratio to Junior Marias. It's roughly 1 in every 180.5 games. Junior Marias just scored 2 for Dagenham and Redbridge the other day.
You know, scored a hat trick.
I think he was on a hat trick. I don't think he scored a hat trick. Maybe he did score a hat trick. Stranger things have happened. For instance, Campbell Money scoring 2 penalties in December 1992. He holds a St Mirren record for most European appearances for the Saints. He said himself that the standout of this period was beating Slavia Prague, I think in the second leg in the UEFA Cup. He said any games under the lights were amazing at Love Street, but they were special in European ties. The noise was incredible, and we always felt like we could beat anyone on a day in Paisley. He hung around with the Saints and ended up coaching and being assistant manager before leaving at the age of 36 to go and manage Stranraer for a few years. He did similar at Ayr United. He had a couple of spells in the juniors, I think mostly with Cumnock down in my neck of the woods, and eventually had a kind of office role with Stenhousemuir. Now he's most often found standing next to Ali Defoy on St Mirren TV for his sins.
Definitely the better of the two.
He was a regular call-up to the Scotland squad. He was mentioned often. He got youth caps, he got a B cap, but he never made a proper full international appearance. He almost went to the 1986 World Cup with Alex Ferguson, but I think was injured just before the World Cup, and so didn't make it out of the provisional squad. This does mean that he has fewer Israel Scotland appearances than Oliver Burke. How does that work for you? As a tenuous joke there about his real name, and it just rolled off the tongue there. So smooth. I'll leave it as I normally do, in the words of the man himself, who, on the subject of his so close but so far relationship with the national team, said, even if I'd played in a full international for Scotland, it wouldn't have surpassed the feeling of winning the Scottish Cup with Saints in front of a 50,000 plus crowd, the biggest crowd I played in front of in my entire career. Welcome to the Hall of Fame, Campbell Money.
Welcome.
Clap, 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 clap.
Clap, that was beautiful.
Mm-hmm. What a man. Big Israel.
I like when this part, do you know what I like about this part of the podcast? I just sit back and it's like story time. It's just like, okay.
Yeah. Sends everyone off to sleep. It's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good way to end the podcast.
I'm still trying to process the fact that his first name is Israel. I think we need to point that out for some folk that will be listening, going, what did he say?
Yeah, especially when you put it in the group chat and I made a joke and no one realised what joke I was making. They thought I was just being anti-Israel.
The crazy thing is that Billy Thompson's real first name's Palestine.
Well, there we go.
See if that makes the edit.
I'm not editing it now. This is the perfect podcast. Miseryhunters.co.uk for our merch. You can read Andrew Christie's latest blog on there as well. And we put all our... We should mention this, and just in case you didn't realise, we put all our podcasts now on YouTube. So even if you don't want to listen to it on YouTube, still go subscribe, because like once we hit a certain subscriber level, we can actually start doing a wee bit more on YouTube, which would be quite cool down the line. But as always, do you know what's annoying? I spent the past 5 minutes trying to think of someone else to say, and all I can think is, fuck Alex Ray.
The Rangers Football Club songbook, and anyone who thinks singing God Save the Queen at a football match in Scotland is a good idea.
Do you know what? Before you jump in, Mark, with yours, I worked with a guy, this is what really annoys me, I worked with a guy who didn't actually like football until he was about 18. He joined the O2 shop that was full of Rangers fans, started following Rangers, and when I asked him, Do you know he sang "God Save the Queen" in many, many Rangers games, but never once in his life has sung "Flower of Scotland"?
They sang "God Save the Queen" during the game last weekend in response to "Flower of Scotland." They booed "Flower of Scotland" getting sung by our fans, and then sang "God Save the Queen."
Aye.
But by all means, carry on. Fuck Mark McGee's Radiators.